Welcome back to the Rules of Engagement. We talked about Fees vs. MVP Game 1. If you missed that, of course, you can check it out at youtube.com/official MLGSC2. Every single piece of video content we do here at MLG, whether it's the Winter Championships, the Winter Exhibitions, the Winter Series Showdown matches, the 2v2v2v2 fun games, the Rules of Engagement, all that stuff goes up on youtube.com/official MLGSC2, along with comments of the day, top 5 plays, a lot of other cool little stuff we do here in our extra time to give you guys some extra content. So go ahead, check out the website, throw us a subscribe. If you like the content, you'll get notified every time new stuff comes up. Now let's talk about Feast vs. MVP game number 2. We're going to start off with controlling a Blink Stalker attack. Now, he did that in game number 1, the Blink Stalker attack. We focused on how to defend it, of course, at least micro-wise and positional-wise. So now we're going to talk about, in game 2, Feast has a similar build. Things to think about on your control on the offensive side. Then we're going to talk about how to break and contain without siege tanks. Again, game number 1, we saw MVP had those siege tanks to be able to push his way down and take that expansion. If you don't have siege tanks, how do you get down and establish that natural expansion? Then we'll talk about how to slow and advance with positional play. Someone's moving across the map and you need to buy some time. You can't quite handle their army. How to try to slow that attack down as it crosses the map. So we're going to jump in at the replay at the 7-minute mark. Talking about controlling a Blink Stalker attack. Again, Feast doing the same build he did last game. This game, though, adding a 4th gateway instead of that robotics because he doesn't see any Widow Mines, right? So he doesn't suspect his opponents doing anything like that. The main reason he doesn't suspect Widow Mines is because the expansion was on the low ground. Game number 1, the expansion was in the high ground, which usually implies your Terran opponent was teching, which could mean, in general, Widow Mines. So, as we look at this game from Feast's perspective, he's getting in here and he's going to try to do a lot of damage, right? His priority here is yes, he wants to kill units. Obviously, right? The units lost tab, that's nice, right? It's great to kill units. He's going to actually get, he already got a couple SCVs, he'll get a couple more here. That one should probably die. And he's killed a couple of Marines, picking at him from the low ground, right? That's good. But one thing you have to realize is, okay, you're on 1 base. Yes, Terra gave up their natural, but they have 2 orbital commands. They could easily have more workers than you because they can double produce SCVs. And, of course, they got double mules. So, you can't afford to trade evenly with your opponent. Not to mention the fact that a Blink Stalker is about 4 times the price of a Marine, and straight on combat, it's about twice as effective. So, you can't go toe-to-toe and just, like, A-move and be like, yeah, I'm going to win the game. No. What you got to do is you got to use the fact you have better tech. You have the Blink tech up. Use that Blink tech defensively. So, you're going to do damage, right? As long as your units are attacking, they'll do damage. Don't worry about the micro offensively. What you do is focus on there. Blink every Stalker out before it dies. Ideally, you don't have those guys walk there and fight. And Feast is doing a great job. I mean, he's losing 1 or 2 Stalkers that maybe it would have been nicer to avoid. But overall, very cost efficient because you focus your micro on keeping the Stalkers alive with the Blink technique. So avoid losses. Because if you let's say trade armies with them, all of a sudden you have no army, they just go establish their expansion, and they're stuck playing 1 base versus 2, you're not going to win that. So you have to keep the Stalkers alive to keep the threat on and keep the ability to be cost efficient. So you blink up, wait for the cooldown to finish. Once the cooldown is finished, then you can engage, do damage, but most importantly, focus on defensive Blink micro. As long as you keep your Stalkers alive, they're going to slowly run out of units as you're killing them, and they'll be forced into a position where they have to use SCVs to buffer. Every time they use SCVs to buffer, even if you're not trading super great there, you can see here, he's been killing SCVs because MVP's had to constantly pull those SCVs out to buffer the attack. So that can help mitigate the fact your opponent has double mules and double SCV production. As we can see here, Feast actually has 8 more workers than his opponent right now, which means they're on probably about roughly even economy. He still would ideally do a little more damage, or at least stop his opponent from moving down to the low ground, because even though he has more workers, he only has that singular nexus. So now it's getting to a point where, remember like last time, the question was, warping to more guys or splitting nexus, which can do more damage? Well, he's got this many Marauders. Even more Stalkers, I'm going to have a hard time trading very efficiently. So maybe instead of playing super aggressively from here on out, what I should be doing instead is taking that expansion and just trying to contain my opponent to prevent him from taking his natural for as long as possible. Now, that's exactly what he's doing, right? He's built the Nexus. He's warping in. He's going to warp in a Sentry, and that Sentry is probably going to walk around here to help potentially put force fields on the ramp to contain a Terran for as long as possible. So from here, we're going to talk about MVP's position, right? He's in a situation where All of a sudden, he's got Stim Pack done, Concussive Shells done. He's starting Combat Shield. He's got, I mean, even workers, because he's been double producing, and his opponent was saving up to build a Nexus. Even workers, second command center, he's economically ahead, and he can maintain that significant economical advantage if he can get that command center down to the low ground. Also, if he can get a fight in the open, because he has Stim Pack and Marauders and Medivacs, he'll trade very well. The problem is getting down to ramp. In the last game, we saw one Siege Tank. Once you have enough units to protect, you can just push it up. They can't have a sentry close enough to force field the ramp because their Siege Tank will blast them in the face. But this game, no such luck. If you watch professional level play, the most common way to break a contain is to just stim and run down, right? Because looking at this from Feast's perspective, this is what Feast sees, right? He's busy macroing. He has to hit a force field. He has to, like, let's say he's over here. He has to notice the red movement on his minimap and hit that force field in about 0.5 to 1 second. If he doesn't get it that fast, too much of this, once enough of the bio gets down the ramp, they can beat this Protoss army because in an open fight, they're much more cost efficient. So, because it's not very common for Protosses to actually always have that instantaneous reaction time, the most common way in pro play is to just try to bust down the ramp, just run straight down there. And even at the very highest level play, there's a reasonable chance your opponent will actually just miss that force field because it happens so fast, they're busy macroing, etc. But if your opponent does hit that force field, you lose a couple units for nothing. It didn't work. All right, so what's your second step plan, right? You're like, well, just running down and hoping you miss a force field didn't quite work. It's not bad to try to, because it will work most of the time. What you want to do is use your drops to force your opponent to retreat. So this is MVP step 2. That didn't work. All right, let's see. Okay, looks like he's ready again. Right, we look at MVPs. He first checkmated your army. It looks like he's ready again. Now I'm going to go out and drop, right? And ideally, your opponent wouldn't even see this drop coming, and you would just get in their base and kill their probes and win the game. But, of course, Feast, being good, had the probe down on the bottom to keep track of the drops. What that caused him to do is, look at this. He has to send a squad of guys back to make sure that drop doesn't do too much damage to him, and he can defend it. Because he's not exactly certain. He saw this one medevac. He's not exactly certain how many medevacs left there, right? He just saw the one, but there could have been one right below it that was just in the shadows. Very hard to tell, so he wants to make sure he has enough guys that combine with warp ins, he doesn't die there. So now that your opponent is you know that once this drop hits, they'll be distracted. You can go ahead and poke again. He says, okay, there's less units defending, so now I can try to make something happen. So as we go forward here, he might wait to see what the drop can do, right? Maybe he can bring back enough units. And as soon as he gets this drop in here, he says, oh no, I'm going to come in here to do damage. Oh no, there's these stalkers here. They're coming to get me. Now there's micro going on over here, right? So right now will be the perfect time because Feast is busy micro and you actually just pull that stalker back to try the ramp again. MVP, though, is a little bit busy microing here, somewhat distracted, and he wants to make sure this gets away safe. And now he's like, okay, that didn't work, but I know he had 7 stalkers out of position. I'll try to ramp again. And now it's at the point where, yes, even though Feast again hits the force field just perfectly, look how many stalkers here. There's only 8 stalkers here. There's not enough stalkers to start one-shotting medevacs quite yet. At least I don't think is 8. Yeah, not quite. They'll bring it down very low. So what you can do then is you can start trying to pick units up and shuttle them down to the low ground. And especially if you have all these guys on the high ground covering them, if you bring these units down here, if your opponent tries to engage them too much, these units from the high ground can help protect them. So he can slowly shuttle guys down. If there's not too many stalkers that can't snipe your medevacs that fast, that'll force them back. You can go and take your expansion because a drop play made them pull back enough units that they were weak enough at the front, you could muscle your way down that ramp. So that's how you do it without Siege Tanks. Unfortunately, he didn't get his natural up to the 15-minute mark. So ideally, you'd have Siege Tanks. I mean, if you know they're going to do Blink Stalkers, of course, you just go for Siege Tanks after expansion because that's the strongest way to do it. But if you don't know, or if you're just doing a different build, you got to try the ramp first. If that doesn't work, do drops to distract them, then move out. And now you're in a situation, because he took his expansion very late, right? He's in, again, a situation where Feast has been able to massively get a worker advantage and get that stronger economy for quite a long time from this faster expansion. He already has his gases up, etc. And he's already working on +2 armor. He's already working on Templar Archives. I don't think he started charge quite. Actually, he already has charge done. So Feast is in a much better position this game than he was in the last game, right? Mostly because there's no Siege Tank, which means you can really use the sentries, but secondarily because in the last game, remember, what type of army did MVP have, right? In the last game, he had a reactor barracks was 90% of his bioproduction for pretty much the whole game. And that reactor barracks meant he had almost all Marines. He had a couple siege tanks, but basically all Marines and medevacs. When you're going up against gateway units, Marines are excellent. Marauders are fun, they're big, they're stronger versus Colossi, stronger versus Psystorm, and they're a little bit better against defending Blink Stalkers because they don't die so fast. But when you're wanting to really launch the attack, it's very, very difficult to be a teched up gateway army with just Marauders as long as they have the good force fields. I mean, honestly, Marauders are still great against gateway units, but they're not like, oh, I have equal armies, so I automatically win. Like, if you have equal armies, we saw that last game, right? He actually had a smaller army than Feast, but because it was Marines, he just easily won against the Charge Ops, Archons, and Blink Stalkers. If it's like this with Marauders, that's not going to happen, right? As he pushes forward here, he's going to realize against the Archons and the Force Fields and the Charge Lots, with Marauder Heavy, doesn't work out nearly as well. A little bit of, he meant to put Photon Overcharge, misclicked it. Time Warp and Photon Overcharge. Not as big a deal, and he can't engage that because he doesn't have the ability to kill Zealots that fast, to kill Archons fast, to kill Sentries fast, and even against Stalkers, Marines actually kill them just as fast per cost as Marauders. So, doesn't have the same damage output, has to back up, not able to get that great timing window, and now he's going into the game with a disadvantage because he has 0 upgrades, he has no Ghost Academy, and you already saw Archons. That's not really particularly good. He doesn't have an insane medevac count, and yeah, he's behind in upgrades and tech. So going forward here, we're going to be at this position where MVP backs up, and he doesn't really want to do too much draw play because he knows that squad of Blink Stalker is somewhere on the map. It can be very dangerous to do drops against it. So he's at this position where as soon as Storm completes, he's going to be faced with a very, very scary Protoss army, which is actually right about now. He's actually able to get some good damage before Storm complete to pick off a few probes. But going forward, we're at this position where Terran's behind in tech, and look at these food counts right here, right? The food counts are exactly even, right? It's 146 to 153. In an even game, if they're both equal upgrades, equal tech, Terran's usually about 20 to 30 food ahead at this point. In a situation where Protoss has +2 armor, Charge, Blink, Storm, Archons, and Terran only has a few medevacs and bio with +1 attack, to make it an equal game, Terran should be about 40 to 50 food ahead because they're so far behind in tech. So this is a very bad position for MVP. He can't really deal with this army heads up. He can't even afford to let it attack him until he gets a substantial number of ghosts on the field to deal with it because he doesn't have decent upgrades either. So he's got to find a way to slow it down. And there's 2 ways to slow it down. Let's actually bring up the map and talk about a couple of those ways. So right now the situation is MVP's army is basically here, right? That's where his army is. Now, his opponent's army, we'll mark that as yellow. His opponent's army is going to be right here, and it's looking to push his army back into his base and then take him out. So it's going to look to go along this route, right? Basically along here. That's the route that the Protoss army is going to want to go on. Basically push his army back and then go attack him and win the game right now, because right now Feast has better upgrades. He's got Templar. As time goes on, MVP might equalize the upgrades. He might get a bunch of ghosts out, and all of a sudden Feast's advantage is greatly diminished. So what does MVP want to do? There's a couple options, right? One option is always, I don't want to fight him, I'll counterattack to keep him busy. We see Zergs do that a lot versus Terran. Terrans do a lot versus Protoss. Protoss don't have the mobility, so they typically don't do it as much, but sometimes with Blink Stalkers against Stormhosts, you'll see it there as well. In fact, actually, there was a great match of that in, what was it, the match? It was a match just a couple days ago we saw on the Winter Exhibition. So go check that out. It was round of 8. It was a great match. If only I can remember the exact player names, but you'll go through YouTube, you'll find it. Anyways, so to counterattack, he can load up all his guys in medevacs, or as many as can fit, which could be most of them, and he just shuttle them up here, and then over and threaten the main. And then the Protoss either has to retreat, or they have to do a base race, and Terrans usually have a slight edge of base races. Even if they don't, if you're losing, you want a base race, because who knows who's going to win a base race, right? It's a little bit crazy. But if you don't want to risk that, which MVP's like, I don't want to risk going to a base race. I'm MVP, you know, multiple GSL champion. I don't have to do that. So, other thing is, find good positions where, even in a good position, your opponent has Storm better upgrades, you can't beat them. What you can do is you can force them to stop and form up into a good position, catch all their army, get a position before they can advance even further. If they just charge blindly and you're all strung out in line, you'll slaughter them, right? So that's exactly what he does. One good position is right here, right? Because it's a small choke and it's high ground. So what he does is he can retreat back here, and he can position his guys into an arc, and then he has a small little squadron on the high ground there. And from this position, the Protoss can't just chain the Zealots in a line and just charge in there because they'll get mowed down. Protoss can break this, but he has to stop, spend 10 seconds restructuring his army to get it ready to go in for next hit. And then, once the Protoss restructures his army, right before the Protoss hits, you got to back away again, and then try your final stand at your natural. And hopefully you bought enough time to get enough ghosts out, you can land those EMPs, neutralize the Templar, and go forward to win the game. So those are the two options. MVP here is going to decide to do the latter, says I'm too manly to base race. And so he's going to stall there for a second to make sure, okay, the Protoss had to turn back, wait for a Templar to catch up. And again, stall for a second, wait for a Templar to catch up, and always run away before a Templar catch up. And what this does is the Protoss has to move at the speed of Templar instead of charging with the Zealots. And again, he's going to stop here. Look at this, turn around. If the Protoss kept going forward, because Templar are so slow, he'd lose this many units would all die before a Templar could even get there and lend their extremely important support. Again, he has the Marauder on the high ground. That can pick off a Templar. If the Templar kept going forward, the Marauder could have focused one down in a few shots. So he's going to try to push this Marauder off first, but then units push back again. So Feast is stuck in this position where he's got to kind of refigure out his army, say, okay, can I break that? Let me think. Okay, I think I can. I just need to stay away from this high ground edge, sneak around the edge, and then I can do it. But MVP is going to back away before then, right? He's going to say, okay, if you're going to play smart like this, I'll back away, maybe do a little bit of skirmish, pick off what I can. But all he's trying to do here, he's not trying to fight the Protoss army because he can't, right? He's trying to slow it down to get all these ghosts out with the Mobius reactor. And if he can get even one EMP or two EMPs, can make it so we can beat this Protoss army. So he's just trying to buy time. And now he's going to make his final stand here to natural. He's going to try to spread his units out. And he's got to this point where he's bought enough time. He's about to get 1-1 upgrades, which is still not as good as 1-2, but it won't be like that horrendously bad. And he's trying to get a few ghosts out. If he could have bought 10 more seconds with those stalling actions, 10 more seconds, land an EMP as they go up the ramp, all of a sudden it's a fight he could potentially win and the game could continue. But as it is, unfortunately, units get up the ramp, they're fighting, and now the storms are landing and killing all his important Marines. One ghost gets out, but it only had a snipe. But then it finished. This ghost actually finished before Mobius reacted, so it got one snipe off on this Templar here. You can see this Templar is hurt, but it takes 2 snipes to finish it off. In fact, he does get the 1 Templar, but it's not like an EMP where it actually clear out a much more significant amount of the Templar's energy. And also, the Marines are already dead. At this point, with the Marines dead, you can't kill the Zealots or the Archons very fast. Without being able to kill those very fast, your army's going to die, and Feast goes on to win this game. So, really, really cool game there. I encourage you guys to check out the VODs, youtube.com/officialmlgsc2. Check out the way Feast controls the opening. Check out the way MVP first tries to break the contain, then realizes he has to form a distraction to do so he sends a drop out. And also, check out the way that when Feast pushes across, MVP tries to slow him down as much as possible, knowing he's significantly behind because he took so much damage to that opening Blink Stalker build that he has to try to buy time to get into later stages of the game where sometimes you can equalize things. But Feast repositions intelligently, slips along the side of that canyon to avoid the high ground, is able to force MVP back into base, hit 10 seconds before enough ghosts get in the field so he can land those great storms, take up the Marines, and then the battle, therefore, is much easier. Hope you guys enjoyed this segment. We'll take a short break and then go on to analyzing game number 3.